Welcome to Boxing Chat Show #8 with Dan Rafael and myself. Dan looking handsome and slightly trimmed this week. We all know he's a new TV star at the moment. He's just come off a call with Shakur Stevenson and Bob Arum. It's Thunderbirds a go next Tuesday, June the 9th in Las Vegas. First boxing in America for 9.5 weeks, I think.
It'll be the first boxing event in America since there was a Showbox card. I believe it was March
the 7th.
Or whatever that weekend was where everything shut down. On the Friday night, they did an event in Hinckley, Minnesota, where they
13th.
Cleared out the spectators,
yeah,
but just the TV folks. There is another card, actually, I think that's going to take place prior to that Shakur Steve. That's the first bigger show TV with some media attention, et cetera. But believe it or not, there's another smaller show on the 6th of June that is taking place in Topeka, Kansas, which is really a club show, not televised or anything like that. But they're supposed to have an event that's been cleared to go by the folks that run the commission out there. And there's another smaller show, not in the United States, but there's also a show on the 6th in Mexico that's headlined by the former 154-pound world title holder Carlos Molina. His company is promoting that show. They're offering it for like a $5 pay-per-view, on the internet. But the first real, I guess, significant fight, at least in America or North America, frankly, will be that Top-Rank ESPN event that will take place, like you said, next Tuesday with Shakur Stevenson in the main event against Felix I can't say his name, Caraballo from Puerto Rico. Non-title fight, even though Shakur's been at featherweight.
When you spoke to Bob just minutes ago and Shakur on the call, are they fully confident about the testing procedure? And they're going to do a week before, so they're already there pretty much now, aren't they? They've been there for 2 days already, 2-3 days.
No, that's not everybody. Not everybody. What number one? The first thing you asked about: are they confident? They're doing all this, as it was laid out by the Nevada State Athletic Commission when they went through all the things that needed to happen and adopted it at their meeting last week. And, they're running through all that. And one of the things that Bob talked about, pretty detailed, was about the cost associated with it, that, he's very happy and anxious to have Top Rank be the first one out of the box in America, but that the cost to do the testing was $25,000 roughly just for this one show. And they're going to be doing, 2 and 3 shows a week coming up. So that's not insignificant. But I think it's a situation where they test and then you have to be quarantined for hours before you get the results. So there are many people associated with that event that are not there quite yet in town. Now, Bob, there's people in Vegas, but like Bob is living there. He's not going to go into the bubble just yet. So it's still going to be probably a few days. Carl Moretti, for example, who's one of the people that's going to be out there, that's the vice president of Top Rank. I don't think he's going to Las Vegas, for example, until tomorrow, which would be Friday. So only a few days before the event. But they're going to follow those rules. And, as Bob said, it's very important to make sure they get it right, or it's going to be a problem for everybody.
So he's going to go Tuesday, Thursday with the occasional Saturday, is what you're telling me?
That's the way it seems. I mean, they've announced officially this card that's going to be on Tuesday with Shakur against Caraballo in the main event. 10-round non-title fight. Shakur going to be trying out the 130-pound division. Then
Four other fights, yeah?
I believe there's a total of 6 bouts on the card.
Right.
10-rounders. Shakur in the main event. They have the women's Olympian lightweight, Michaela Mayer, undefeated woman who probably will be in line for a world title in the not-too-distant future. She's fighting in the co-feature against Helen Joseph. That's a 10-round women's fight, but the rounds are shorter, so it's not as long as a fight, only 2-minute rounds. And then there are, I believe, 4 other 6-round bouts on the card, including 2 of the bright heavyweight prospects that Top Rank promotes. One is the Italian Olympian, Guido Vianello, who is trained by Kevin Barry, a very well-known trainer. And the other one is a guy that was a top United States amateur that would have been a favorite to be in the Olympics should they have taken place in 2020 or even 2021 for that matter, named Jared Anderson.
Yes, I know Jared, yeah.
Started with Tyson Fury when Tyson got ready to fight Deontay Wilder.
Exactly.
Kid, he's young. He's only maybe 19 or 20 years old.
Very athletic. Very athletic. Yeah.
So they'll have some of those prospects. And then they have the card a couple of days later on the Thursday where they have, I believe the contract weight for that fight is like 128. And that's a fight between Jesse Magdaleno, who's a former champion at 122, but has been fighting at featherweight at 126. And his opponent is, a solid, I wouldn't want to even call him a journeyman, but like just a solid, like maybe second tier type contender opponent. And name is Yenifel Vicente. And that should probably be, it's not the most meaningful fight in the history of the world, but I think they know they haven't been able to put together these big events so far. So they're hoping to just get some good quality action. I suspect that Magdaleno and Vicente should provide some good entertainment in my mind. And the other thing about it, Gareth, is this, and they announced this on the call today. I've been hearing about this for the last couple of days, but they made it official today. When those bouts are shown on ESPN on Tuesday, they're showing the entire card. It's a 4-hour block starting at 7 o'clock Eastern time until 11 o'clock Eastern time. That's a lot of time on ESPN to have boxing at the forefront because there's no other live sports going on. So, if you want to watch boxing, you got 4 hours to play with there. And if you're a fan, that'll be good because we haven't seen a live fight, like you said, Gareth, in almost 3 months.
Did anyone on the call ask him about those shows going out in the UK on BT Sport or Sky?
He didn't mention anything about international television. Obviously, Top Rank has international TV deals, but so I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if they're going to wind up there in some kind of tape delay capacity. I'd be surprised if they'd be live. And I say that because, even in the United States where they're going to be on ESPN, the commentators who would do the show, they won't be ringside for the event, Gareth. You're going to have only Bernardo Osuna, who conducts some of the interviews after and before the fight. He'll be on site in Las Vegas. But the commentators, Joe Tessitore, is going to be in the studio in Bristol doing the event. And his two, his broadcast.
Bristol, Connecticut.
Yeah, Bristol, Connecticut. And Mark Kriegel and Timothy Bradley Jr., who I believe are the other two commentators are on the call. They're going to be doing it from their homes in California. So they're remote. And as it's like Bob was saying on the call and has been telling other people who've interviewed him, Top Rank's goal right now, yes, they want to have good fights, but they just want to get through the first two shows, have everything work out, everybody be safe, nobody get sick, nobody get the virus, and reassess after that. And, by the third week or so of these events, there's going to be a title fight. Andrew Maloney, for example, who him and his twin brother, Jason, Australia, they were able to get into the United States with the help of the Australian government. And so Andrew has the second tier title at 115 pounds. He's in line to defend the title in his fight. And so we're going to see that. We'll see some of the significance ramp up as the series progresses into the summer. They have some good fights later in the summer. For example, they've got Ivan Baranchyk, who was in the World Boxing Super Series in the junior welterweight division. He's going to be
by Josh Taylor, of course.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be in a main event against Jose Zepeda, who a lot of people thought beat Jose Ramirez in a title fight not that long ago. And they have another really good fight, which was something they had been trying to schedule before this pandemic happened, and that's a light heavyweight elimination between Joe Smith Jr. And Storm Alvarez, former champion. So
nice.
That undercard, the return of Andrew Cancio, who's a former champion at 130 pounds in his first fight with Top Rank. So, you're going to see some recognizable names, and it seems like some decent fights.
So you squeeze a lot of information in there, Dan, for the listeners, for the viewers, as always. I've sent a text to Bob right now to see if BT Sport or Sky are going to be hosting them. Hopefully, he'll get back to us while we're chatting. If not, I'll put it out on a tweet later or in a story tomorrow morning with the Telegraph. But it's been an incredibly... I haven't really commented it on social media. It's not really my style in general. It's been a very sad and tragic and momentous time in America since even in the last 4 or 5 days, it's been huge. I'm delighted, and this is an important discussion point, I'm delighted that Floyd Mayweather's come forward to donate a large sum of money. I believe it's around 100K US for the funeral of Floyd George, the man that was murdered by a policeman. It's a murder.
George Floyd.
George Floyd. Sorry, it's late here. My mind is doing tricks on me. Floyd Mayweather, I've just mixed it up. It's brilliant when our community comes together from our fight community and supports that kind of thing. And it is murder. It's been treated as murder, and what everyone can see, it is murder.
Well, the officers who were involved, one of them was originally charged with third-degree murder. They just upgraded the
second,
the second degree, which is much more
Yeah.
serious, the punishment that you would have if you're convicted. And the three other policemen who also were fired, who were standby, while it happened, they've also been charged and, are looking at heavy doses of jail time, which, by watching the video, they deserve. But you talk about Floyd Mayweather, people see the flamboyant, the flashy side. We've all seen that. We've been around some of the crazy stuff he says and does. Some of that's who he is, some of that's for show. But there's a part of Floyd that a lot of people don't know that I've seen, just as well as some of the other stuff that we talk about with him that's maybe not so good, but there's a very good side also. This is not the first time he's done this. I mean, I called up when I heard that when it wasn't Floyd talking about it, when Leonard Ellerby, commented that Floyd was in fact paying for his memorial services, which I guess there's a few different ones in different areas of the country where he's lived and was born and where he was had grown up.
Flint, Michigan, yeah.
Remember the column I had written back,
Grand Rapids, sorry.
No, not where Floyd grew up, where
Oh, where Leonard grew up. Oh, he's donated.
Where George, no, where George, there's services in different locations where George Floyd both lived, was born, and grew up.
I see.
Like around different places in the United States. What I was saying about that is that it reminded me of a piece I had written several years ago. The first championship that Floyd Mayweather won as a pro was when he stopped Gennaro Hernandez.
Hernandez, yeah.
Here at 130 pounds. I've been voting for Gennaro for the Hall of Fame for a number of years. And Gennaro died a young man, as a rare form of cancer.
Yes, I remember this.
And Gennaro, there was not a person in boxing who did not like and respect Gennaro Hernandez. He was a great guy. People might know his brother, Rudy Hernandez, who's known as a top trainer and cut man, and works with a lot of the Tekken boxing fighters from Japan, as well as plenty of American fighters. But when Gennaro died, he never made huge money in his professional career. And Floyd always appreciated that Gennaro gave him the opportunity to fight for the title. When he Floyd was a young fighter, like 18-0 or 17-0 or something like that. And always had a tremendous amount of respect for Gennaro as a person and as a fighter. And when he died, again, he never made huge money. He paid the tab for, Gennaro's memorial service and funeral. And I had went back, I think it was like 2011 or so. I found a column that I had written about that exact situation. And I was reminded after I posted that on social media, that he's done this at other times also, that he paid, I guess, for part of Joe Frazier's memorial service when the former heavyweight champion died, a few years ago. And, there was another one also, it escapes me at the moment, but the point is, this is not like just a one-time thing that Floyd has done. He's had these types of charitable things for years, not to mention all the other stuff he does.
I've got another one, the turkey giveaway, but I've got another one. One of my great days with Floyd, where there were only three journalists, myself and Steve Karp, that used to be the Las Vegas Review-Journal boxing correspondent. Cynical old thing he was, but I always used to say it was Steve.
I love Steve because we're both big Yankee fans.
Yeah, no, but also I used to call him Steve Craps because it was in Vegas and his name was Steve Karp, and he was a bit of an anagram himself. But Steve and I think it might have been Kevin Ioli, went one day. I was invited. I was in Las Vegas on an extended period, and I went to a project with Floyd one morning where he gave $150,000 to three families for them to build their own homes.
Mm-hmm. That does not surprise me.
I've got to say, on that day, he was so sweet with the people, and you could see the immense pleasure that he got in complete. They were going to these were self-build projects, yeah. So he was donating the money for them to buy the materials, literally the sides of the houses, and we went to this project, and it was very, very moving. And I really noticed, I think, tears in Floyd's eyes those days.
That doesn't surprise me at all because, again, people see the flashy guy when he's promoting a fight and he says things to rile people up, and sometimes that gets aggravating. But again, like I always look at it like this: whether you're Floyd Mayweather or you're me or you or whoever, people you're not exactly the same in every situation. You don't have just one way of acting or one specific thing that you do. There's different degrees of your personality. And you talk about whether it was giving those families money to help build their homes or giving money to folks to help have a memorial service for the death of their loved one. He did it, in his home area in Michigan. He donated money when their amateur boxing program was going under, and they were trying to have their Golden Gloves tournament. They had a short. What did he do? He wrote them a check so they could have their boxing tournament. I mean, and that's just, and by the way, Floyd Mayweather is certainly not the only top earning boxer that has given money. I mean, there's a lot of guys. Manny Pacquiao has spent most of his money helping.
Well, they call him the welfare state in the Philippines. There isn't one, but they call him
handing out money.
Views of hundreds and hundreds of people, you know.
Look, Oscar De La Hoya has hundreds of millions in his career. He built a school. He built a wing of a hospital that named after his mother, who had passed from breast cancer many years ago. With his foundation that's given away, tens of millions of dollars over the years to help charitable causes. So, what Floyd is doing is a tremendous thing. He should be applauded for. And there's lots of other famous boxers who've done the same thing that deserve that credit also.
It's funny, you say, we're all different on different days. I think what tickled me afterwards, and this is typical Floyd as well, he'd made those donations to the families. And I looked on his social media the next day, and he was betting $500,000 on basketball games as well. So, it's the rough and the smooth.
He can do that again soon, Gareth, because the NBA is coming back, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I haven't. It's deplorable what's gone on in America with the death of this chap. Well,
I'll tell you this. I mean, I live 25 minutes from downtown Washington, D.C., where the riots have been going on in the protests for the past week and a half, and to just sit on the couch at night and watch some of the TV news coverage of it, and to see a place that's my home essentially. I mean, it's not my immediate neighborhood, but this is. I mean, I didn't grow up in this area, but I've lived here now for more than 20 years. This is home. This is where I have my home here. I have my family here. I have a child here, and it's sad to see them doing that kind of destruction to such a tremendous city. And by the way, Washington, of every place in the United States, is used to having protests because as the nation's capital, they have marches and protests and stuff all the time. I mean, it's just part of like the regular calendar, all the time. But 95% of the time, they're quite peaceful, and people come and they get a permit to do their march and their protest, whatever their organization is or their cause that they're dealing with. And it's usually pretty run-of-the-mill quiet. This is a whole different story.
Yeah, it's very tragic. Well, it took me back. Obviously, there were similar riots in '68. It was also the Summer of Love with the hippies in San Francisco and that area. But '68, obviously, there were huge riots. A couple of years later, in the UK, there was an interview with Muhammad Ali, who was also, of course, a great activist eventually for a very free spirit. I want to play you, and for all our listeners.
I always wonder when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a...
Let me do that again. Hang on.
I always wonder when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying.
I don't know why. Let me find it again and run it properly. I don't know why it's not running. It is...
No, I heard him talking about going to church and...
Well, no, it's the way... I
always wonder when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I ask questions. I go out, travel these countries. I watch how their people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? I said, why is Jesus white with blonde and blue eyes? Why is the Lord's Supper all white men? Angels are white, cool. And Mary and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally, we go to heaven. I said, well, what happened to all the black angels they took the pictures?
Makes a good point.
I said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. So this people saying that, well, I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now? Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks. And I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. So anyway, I was always curious. I always wondered why. Tarzan is the king of the jungle in Africa. He was white. White man swinging in Africa with a diaper on, hollering. Right. And all the Africans, so he's beating them up and breaking the lion's jaw. And here's Tarzan talking to the animals, and the Africans been there for centuries, and he can't talk to the animals. Only I always wonder why Miss America was always white. All the beautiful brown women in America, beautiful suntans, beautiful shapes, all type of complexions, but she always was white. And Miss World was always white, and Miss Universe was always white. And then they got some stuff called White House cigars, White Swan soap, King White soap, White Cloud tissue paper, White Rain hair rinse, White Tornado flow wax. Everything was white. And the angel food cake was the white cake, and the devil food cake was the chocolate cake.
I think we got the point, Gareth.
And the president lived in the White House.
We got the point. I mean, he's making a valid point. I mean, you know, it's time for a change.
He had a way of putting things. And I think that's why we loved him so much, because people are laughing. It was a big chat show. It was the biggest chat show in Britain with a guy called Michael Parkinson at the time, who wrote for The Telegraph, even when I was writing for The Telegraph, actually. He was a formidable interviewer and journalist. And without wanting to make a big statement, because I'm just watching these events like you, I'm watching them unfold as a journalist, and I'm feeling the things in my heart and supporting what's right. But it just, I found that clip, or someone sent it to me, and I just thought, you know, it's great that we had someone like that in our sport who was able to put it that way, that he made people laugh out of embarrassment. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
You know, he was a special person, and like he got on a rap there, didn't he? You know,
Yes, sir.
and all right, he was talking semantics, but hopefully, I mean, just to, because it's not over yet, but hopefully to put our own little bit of sharing about this. Hopefully things do calm down, because, you know, more people are dying in the protests, you know, and there's, you know, the bloodshed is...
I'll tell you, Gareth, one of the things I always liked about boxing, now it wasn't like this back way before our time when black fighters were not allowed to fight for championships against the white fighters, but in the time that's been allowed, and that pretty much if you can...
Since the 20s, since the 1920s, 100 years.
Yeah, more or less. Here's the point though. My impression is, if you can fight, you can fight. In other words, if you are somebody that the public's interested in, that the fans are interested, that has an interesting story to tell, and you might make a good fight, and you've got ability, like you're not going to be held back because of your ethnicity or your color or your religion. You know, it's the least prejudiced sport there is, because it only comes down, can you win and can you bring a crowd? And so there's been...
But it's also recognized, Dan, as a sport in which immigrant communities,
yes,
the black, or you could say African American, you know, we say black in this country, and it's...
Yeah, we say that too.
Yeah, it's been totemic. They have been totemic figures who have been able to be, even Deontay Wilder has been one. They like to stand up as representatives of their community.
And not just the black fighters. It was like that with Jewish fighters, with Irish fighters, Italian fighters, with
Polish.
Mexican fighters.
Yeah.
Now, you know, we've seen it in more recent years with Filipino fighters.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, you know, Puerto Rican fighters. It's certainly fighters that now have come from many of the former Soviet countries. So, you know, again, only in the United States could you be a Manny Pacquiao, a Filipino, you know, weighing 122 pounds when he first got here, who could become an international megastar.
Yeah.
And nothing to do with what his religion was or what his ethnicity was or the country he was from, is that he was exciting to watch and he could fight and people followed him. And same thing with many other fighters that became super famous.
Well, I mean, to twist it back on, remember when Floyd called him the yellow guy?
I remember that. That was an unfortunate time. I was offended by that. I didn't think it, you know, he could hype up a potential fight with Manny in a million different ways without having to resort to that type of language.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, in that same situation, besides just, you know, saying those anti-Asian comments, you know, he also invoked language that people who, you know, were gay would not have appreciated. So like I said, you're not who you are on your worst day usually, and you're not who you are on your best day. So, you know, Mayweather's had some bad days like that, and he's had some great days like what has just recently happened with paying for the funeral. I choose to, not just for Mayweather, but for most people, hope that they're more like they are on their best day than they are on their worst day.
I just hope that things do. do quell, and that there isn't a bloodshed. That's all, because and death, because as you know, I've been coming to America for 25 years working. I love the place. It's an amazing place to visit. It's an amazing place to work.
I'm surprised they still let you in here.
Don't you start.
All right, we got some questions. Let's do some questions.
We have got some questions. We got a load of questions from our last show. Here we go. This is just one from John Dwyer. I think it's from John Dwyer, but there was a correction. Eddie said that AJ only had 3 weeks fight night notice to get ready for Ruiz. I think I might have got that wrong. It might have been 19 days.
It was about 3 weeks from the time that Ruiz took.
3 weeks, yeah.
It was just about that. I mean, it wasn't quite a full 2 months like it normally would be.
Yeah.
Not really a question. He's just trying to bust your chops.
XTCALEXXTC 2 days ago asked the question just after we put out the last show. What's the one thing you would change about the sport of boxing if you had the power, and why? You go, Dan.
I would get rid of the WBA. I would eviscerate them from the face of the planet, because they have discredited boxing for years and years and years, for virtually the entire time I've been covering the sport for 20 years. The fact that they would name multiple champions in the same weight class just for money, and don't even try to fake that it's for any other reason, basically, I find that to be disgusting. 4 organizations is too many. I have some issues here and there with the others, but the WBA is way, way above them in terms of how much they offend me. I would get rid of the WBA in a heartbeat.
I would not allow the money kings to run the sport, and what I would do is I would try and funnel it to have one champion in each division. I would also have a division between cruiserweight. I'd have a cruiserweight.
That's the first thing you would do, is add another division?
I'd have a heavyweight and super heavyweight. Wait, no, it's not the first.
I totally disagree.
Let me finish.
No.
But what most of all, I would try and have one champion in the world, and I would not allow these fight with a rematch for champions. I think that I would like to see the next in line get the fight,
I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you about that, but to think that those are the things that you would focus on as the very first thing, that surprises me, I have to be honest.
Well, because
we've already got 17 weight classes. To add another division, I mean,
you're focusing on that, but that's one of the things I would do. I mean, the main thing I would do is try and create one champion in each weight division and not allow matches and rematches. Because it's only done because the amount of money it will generate, And,
I mean, this may be blasphemous to some. I don't necessarily have a problem with there being multiple world titles. Now, within reason, I can't stand that one organization have 3. But if there was 2 or 3 organizations, I can live with that. Maybe it's because it's the era I grew up in when the IBF came into being. But I understand that boxing is, first, a couple things. It's a business. It's a world business. It's not just like in, say, the NBA, there's only one elite league and they have the best players in the world and they crown one champion. If you only had one champion in each weight class, it would stymie so much about what happens in boxing. It would diffuse so much energy in areas where there's fans if you could only had one world champion. So again, I say within reason, but think about how many great nights you've had for big championship fights in the UK, and then maybe there's another champion of another organization that's fighting in Asia or in the United States or in Mexico or wherever, and they've got big nights also. Now, ultimately, you want to see those top champions fight each other. I think the public kind of can tell who the best guys are generally if they spend 5 minutes, looking into it. So I don't
think the general public do
go for just one champion.
I don't think the general public do know. I think the general public knows.
I said the boxing fan. They spend 5 minutes
in the world. The general sports fan knows the name of about 10 boxers in the world, and I'll name you them now: Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. Who else do they know right now? They probably know the name of Oscar De La Hoya still.
Yeah, I mean, those guys don't fight anymore, obviously. I mean, you talk about retired fighters. You talk about, obviously, Tyson and Evander Holyfield and people like that.
And Tyson and Holyfield. There you go. There's Lennox Lewis. That's who people know.
It's food for thought.
Okay. All right. I'll move on. I know that's your secret word for let's move on. To both, and this comes from Marco Figoni. To both, when do you think Crawford versus Spence will happen, and who do you think would win this fight? Is it the biggest fight in boxing?
Well, it's not the biggest fight in boxing. It's a big fight and a great fight, and I hope it happens, and I love to see it. But it's certainly not bigger than Canelo at Triple G3 or Joshua versus Tyson Fury and those types of fights. But it's certainly on that next level. It will happen when the two sides decide that they don't really have another avenue as lucrative, or when they decide enough is enough and we want to. We have to, for the sake of this era, fight each other for who's number one, basically. I mean, look, Terence Crawford's a great fighter. I don't know if his resume says he's a great fighter, but based on what I've seen of him and covering him and his ability, he seems to me he's a great fighter. Spence has a little bit of a deeper resume, certainly as a welterweight, and may also be a great fighter, even if we don't know exactly how he's doing since his accident. But the whole way you make yourself a great fighter, where there's no dispute and no argument, whether it's from the boxing people, the media, the fans, is when the two best guys fight each other. So if you thought that Ray Leonard was a great fighter and you thought that Tommy Hearns was a great fighter, you didn't really know it, frankly, until they fought each other. And it seems to me, even though some of those guys had other significant fights prior to that. So they need to fight each other. And I think both athletes realize that. I mean, every time I hear Errol Spence speak or Terence Crawford speak on that fight, they say the same thing. We want the fight. It's a big fight. And then they bring up the money. So I don't even think it's a situation right now where it's an unwillingness for Top Rank and PBC to work together. I think that, that can be overcome in a big way. We saw it with what happened with Wilder and Fury, where they were able to get together, not only for the one fight, but now to plan, the third fight. So when the fighters demand it and the money is reasonable, I think then we'll see it. But again, because of this coronavirus, there's no crowds at the moment, so it's not going to happen probably this year. Hopefully, maybe like this time next year, when we can finally get to the point where we see that fight.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you on all those points. I think if I focus on the fight itself, it's not the biggest fight in boxing. I completely agree with you. It's on the same level as a Vasyl Lomachenko and a Teofimo Lopez.
Oh, it's bigger than that. Much bigger than that.
In America, it is. In America, it is.
It would dwarf the pay-per-view numbers of a Lomachenko-Lopez. And I love Lomachenko-Lopez as a fight, but it's a much bigger fight. Errol Spence has already been established on pay-per-view. They've both drawn good crowds to their fights, whereas not to say that Lopez and Lomachenko have it, but not at that level.
I think it would be as exciting a fight to watch Teofimo Lopez and Vasyl Lomachenko fight. I mean, in terms of magnitude, yes. I agree with you. But I am a huge advocate of Terence Crawford's style. I think his adaptations when he boxes are extraordinary. He's a great boxer, but then when he unlocks someone, he hunts them down. And I love that about him. He's always looking for the finish. I think
a little bit of a slow starter.
That he is. They're both elite fighters. I favor Crawford, but he's come up. I mean, I watched him here as a lightweight against Ricky Burns years ago up in Scotland, and he looked a real talent then. But he's come up all those weight divisions. He's not naturally a big welterweight, and for that reason, I see split draw, and I see them needing two fights.
Exactly.
It's very hard to call, but I just think in my mind.
The fight, Gareth, they're both champions. They're both undefeated. They were both quality amateurs. They're both prime. Crawford's a little bit older than Spence, but not like, a lot older than him. They both have big hearts in the sense that they didn't have any qualms whatsoever about going out overseas to fight. Like you mentioned, the Ricky Burns fight, when Crawford won his first title, it was overseas. When Errol Spence won his first world title in the welterweight division, it was by going to the hometown of Kell Brook and scoring a knockout in a great performance. So this fight has everything you want to see. Our era's, not to go melodramatic, but it's sort of like our times, Leonard and Hearns. The two best guys in the division you don't really know who's going to win. They have, good styles. They're exciting, and they're both on that same elite level. They're both pound for pound top 5-ish. I mean, you want to see the match.
Yeah, I'm just I've got some great questions coming in here on the on Twitter now. By the way, look, I can't split them, but it's a fight we've got to see, and I would love to see it. Some great questions here on Twitter from putting this out earlier. Which are the top 5 best documentaries to watch? You can name 3 first of all, and I'll name another 2.
Well, let's see. And these are just off the top of my head. There's not in any particular order, but documentary-wise, if you take into account the entirety of the series of the modern fights, you cannot go wrong with the 12-part HBO Legendary Night series, half-hour episodes on many of the great HBO fights, which were the biggest fights in boxing: Leonard Hearns, Leonard Hagler, Tyson Lewis, De La Hoya, Trinidad, Chavez, Meldrick Taylor.
Can viewers access those?
They're on YouTube. I know that. They're not. You can't buy them or get them on streaming, but they're on YouTube. And then later, many years after the original series aired, they did a one-off, a 90-minute Legendary Nights show that was the Gaddy Ward trilogy and relationship. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then if you go back, there's obviously been a number of docs on Muhammad Ali. When We Were Kings is a fantastic.
Got to be in there.
That's one of the best ever. I think it won some Oscar awards when they.
Have you seen Mr. Calzaghe?
That one I have not seen.
You must watch it. It's brilliant. I'm in it.
Yeah.
You
must watch. Hold on. Then you must watch Klitschko and Maravilla. One about the Klitschko brothers and one about Sergio Martinez, because I'm in both of those.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, no, but this is the point. There we go. There's 5. Must watch.
And there's many more, by the way. There's a lot more.
There are. It doesn't look like that was from Izzy Esco, by the way.
Oh, I got to throw one more in there, by the way. And this is a recent one. In the 30 for 30 series of documentaries that are on ESPN, not that long ago, they did one on Buster Douglas about the fight against Tyson. That was also terrific, called 42-1, which were the odds.
Oh, yeah. I bet that is really good.
Fight.
Does that go into what he went through before the fight as well?
It covers pretty much everything, and it has Buster's. It covers before the fight itself. His post Tyson life, and you were there. I think when they were promoting the first fight between Wilder and Fury in Los Angeles. That was right around the time where the doc was coming out, and they had Buster Douglas in town as part of that.
Big hat on,
and so Buster did a number of interviews and spoke to a lot of the media guys about that documentary. That did a hell of a job on.
Was Ernie Shavers there? No, who was it?
Ernie Shavers was there. Spence was there. Evander
was there. Yeah.
Not George Foreman. Lennox was there.
Riddick.
They had a bunch of
people was there. Riddick, Bo, and Lennox had a bit of a pushing match on stage. Do you remember?
They had to keep them apart. I remember. You'd think. I mean, I talked about that. He's like, dude, let it go, man. It was like 25, 30 years ago. But Riddick Bowe can't let it go.
No, neither can Lennox, by the way.
Or so than Bowe.
Yeah, Sean C. Sullivan asks, it doesn't look like Billy Joe Saunders will fight Canelo this year now. So if Callum Smith ends up fighting Billy Joe Saunders, obviously that's kind of two brilliant British super middleweights. In your opinion, would that make the winner of that fight the number one super middleweight, given the fact that Canelo moves around weights?
Well, number one, I'm not totally convinced that it's not going to be Saunders. They're still hashing out what Canelo's situation will be. There's been other names that have come up, but I am told they haven't. They're discussing possibilities internally. They have not actually begun to negotiate per se with any of the teams for other boxers who have been mentioned. As for if Callum Smith were to defeat Billy Joe Saunders, yes, he'd be the number one super middleweight because I already have him as the number one super middleweight. However, if Billy Joe Saunders
beat Saunders, yeah.
If he beats Saunders,
yeah,
then I would have him number one because I already have him number one. Just keep your place if you keep winning. If Saunders beat Callum Smith, I guess it would depend in my mind anyway how you win. I don't know if I'd be ready to automatically make him number one based on that victory, depending on how it goes, because there's some other excellent fighters in that weight class, whether it's a Caleb Plant or it's a David Benavidez, who also are excellent fighters too. And Canelo Alvarez is in that weight division also if he chooses to be. So some competition there for sure.
I think that's a very, very controversial fight, Billy Joe Saunders and Callum Smith, if it goes 12 rounds. It's a really hard fight to score because of their styles. It's going to be controversial.
I personally, based on their styles, Gareth, I like Callum Smith as a fighter, but as you mentioned, style-wise, I don't know if that makes for really that great of a fight, to be honest with you.
It'll be a very weird fight for some reason. So I've always said that myself. Yeah, but I would like to see it. Just reconfirming for Bob Arum here. Boxing is back. # All fights will air nationally on ESPN and ESPN Deportes, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. Proud to give this massive platform and opportunity to both our stars of today and the future, says Bob Arum. I'm going to go back to some of our questions.
So did he say anything about the UK broadcasting situation?
No, he hasn't come back to me yet.
Okay.
He's not replied. I think the script's too small for him to read.
Bob will get it. Don't worry. Bob's an animal with his phone.
This is good. We'll have to go quickly through these ones. This is from An Untouchable. Great show, guys. He says, I've got 5 questions.
5 questions?
We need short answers now, Dan. Otherwise, we'll have to edit you.
It's like Number 1. Like the lightning round of my Impact show.
Who in the history of boxing could have beaten a prime Roy Jones Jr.? It kind of depends what weight. Maybe we're talking...
Well, if you're talking about prime, you're talking about probably 168.
168.
I say 168 was it, but he didn't stay there very long.
Yeah.
But that, my opinion, in his prime at that weight, I don't think anybody in the history of boxing beats Roy Jones at 168. Period. I said it.
It's a great fight with Bernard Hopkins. No, you're right. Speed, reflexes. Even Joe Calzaghe would have struggled with him, you know?
Totally agree. And Joe's a great fighter in his own right. And
yeah, exactly.
No way.
Could Manny Pacquiao have beaten Floyd if they'd fought in 2010? Let me answer that first. No, I don't think so. Because I think stylistically, Floyd would always have had his number. He'd have found a way to win.
I think that Pacquiao would have had a better chance in that time because he was more closer to his prime. But I look at it like this. If the Manny Pacquiao that we saw potentially with an injury that he said was able to still win about 4 rounds, a prime healthy Manny Pacquiao might have had a better chance against Mayweather in my mind. But I still, and I've said this before, ever since that fight ever became a thing in people's minds, I always, even though I never divulged it till the week of the fight when I had to make my pick, when they finally made it 5 years later. In my mind, as much as I'm a fan of Manny Pacquiao, I always picked and always thought Mayweather would win the fight, no matter when they fought.
This is a really good one. Nice answer, Dan. Here's a really good one. Prime Larry Holmes versus Prime Lennox Lewis. Who wins? I'll go first. We know the brilliance of Lennox Lewis's jab and right hand and his presence in the ring. We know the brilliance, even greater, of Larry Holmes's jab and his ability to control other fighters. Lennox Lewis was one of the first generations of the super heavyweights. It's a really hard fight to pick. Holmes, for me, is in the top 5 to 6 all time of heavyweights.
Give us the pick. Come on, give us the pick.
Larry Holmes on points.
Without belaboring it and giving a big, long-winded explanation, I would pick Larry Holmes on a close points decision also. Over
15 rounds.
Well, that's interesting because Larry fought 15-round fights and showed the mettle of those last 3 rounds, and it's not Lennox's fault. And Lennox, certainly was in a number of his 12-round fights, but those 3 rounds, you really see what a guy's made of in my mind, and we know what Larry was made of.
Could Nazim Hamed have beaten Marco Antonio Barrera with the right preparation and game plan?
Yes, he could have, definitely. All respect to Barrera, all-time great fighter, one of my favorite fighters ever. But the Nazim Hamed that fought that night, and again, I'm not making excuses for him. He clearly was not in the right preparation situation. He had a lot of weight problems going to that fight. But the Naz from a couple of years earlier, would have had a better chance to beat Barrera, in my opinion. But again, it's, we saw what happened in their fight. It was, people say it was a complete blowout. It wasn't a blowout. I mean, yes, Barrera won, no question. But Naz won probably 4 or 5 rounds of that fight, even if it was a struggle. A couple of years earlier, without the issues of the weight and with a little bit of a more grounded situation going to that fight, yeah, he could definitely have won the fight.
Yeah, I think his ego might have run away with him at that point, his narcissism as a fighter. And I think, because I followed Naz's career, obviously, and covered a lot of it. And Brendan Ingle was warning for a long time before they split that Naz wasn't developing, that he was one of the great punchers ever in the division,
No question. In boxing history.
In boxing history in the division, yes. And I think because he could rely on that power and it had worked for him so many times, he didn't evolve his techniques and adjust against guys like Barrera, who you had to break down over time. You couldn't go in there and just, he was so tough and so technical and so clever and had such a great chin.
And could brawl also.
And could brawl.
Here's the analogy. Manny Pacquiao was that wild slugging swinger who didn't have a lot of technique, but we had the great natural ability and the punching power. And when he got to America, that was brought out and refined by Freddie Roach over the years. And he still had all those attributes, but he became a tremendous boxer also who could use both hands and do a lot of different things besides just rely on the one big punch. Naz he probably had the ability, if he had concentrated on it, to do the same kind of refinement that Pacquiao did, but he never got beyond just being that wild swinging slugger the way that Pacquiao did. It just, for whatever reason, he didn't put the time and effort into it.
And Dan, the final question tonight, it might be a more difficult one for you than it is for me, although it's quite difficult for me. Name the 3 best British fighters of all time.
3 best British fighters.
I'll go first, so you've got a moment
to
think about it.
Yep.
I'm gonna go post-war, because all time is too difficult, because you go all the way back to the Benny Lemon.
Jimmy Wild.
Yeah, exactly. Jimmy Wild. Yeah. The Jimmy Wilds of this world.
For those who don't know, the Hall of Fame flyweight champion.
Jimmy Wild from the 1920s. Yeah, I mean, he has to be in the reckoning. But you can go all.
But give us your modern greats.
My modern greats. I was thinking Tyson Fury was in my mind a little bit there, but he's featuring in the top 5. Ken Buchanan, who fought in that brilliant era in the 70s. Joe Calzaghe, who finished 46-0 undefeated. I know he fought Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. later in his career.
I'm not going to argue about Calzaghe.
Yeah, and I'm going to go Lennox Lewis. Because
hard to argue with any of those. I mean, I don't know what to put my guys in, but without question, I would say number 1 is Lennox Lewis. And then other guys, you're talking about Joe Calzaghe. Fury has a chance to be there. I don't think he's there yet. I think he needs a little bit. He's got the potential without question. He can definitely do it. And again, not to say that it's above the guys I just named, but at least in the conversation in that group of top British fighters ever, you have to put Hatton in the conversation. You probably got to put Carl Froch in the conversation.
And Nazim Hamed.
And Nassim Hamed, exactly.
Yeah. I think those are the guys really from, the times that we've been around.
Yeah.
Who the greatest boxers. I mean, Ricky Hatton's the most popular,
What I was thinking about Ricky a lot. I was thinking a lot about Hatton today because it's the anniversary, 15 years.
It is, Costa Zoo, 15 years.
Great victory against Costa Zoo, which was, probably one of the biggest wins in Britain by a British boxer. Not the biggest necessarily, but certainly, in that upper echelon of British victories. That was a huge win for Ricky. So I was watching back on YouTube some of that fight, and I was, tweeting out pictures of my poster from that fight and that sort of stuff. Two great sportsmen and a great achievement for Hatton to win a fight like that against a Hall of Famer like Costa Zoo.
So, Dan, it's great to have loads of questions like this from the fans.
Yeah,
Keep them coming. Great fun answering them. We will probably be back together now. We should probably just give it a break and maybe chat after the first event back.
Yeah, first event's going to be. I know you have one more question for me tonight, though.
Oh, yeah, of course, because it's that time. And I hope your wife's now cooking. What the flip is for dinner tonight?
Don't know yet. We haven't decided.
Stop it, will you?
I'm serious. It's about 10 after 6 in the evening here. We're not sure. My wife and son have been outside. My son's been running around in the sprinkler and the slip and slide. So dinner is the next discussion.
1 time out of 8, you've told us. That's not great odds, you know?
Hey, man, what can I tell you?
Listen, it's always...
We'll talk after, after Shakur's return, and we see how the return, at least in America, how boxing has gone.
Yeah, lovely. We'll have a chat on Wednesday. Yeah, lovely. And we'll have a little talk about what's coming up on the Thursday as well.
And I'm excited about it. I'll give one little plug. Shakur Stevenson, who fights on Tuesday, he is my guest on my Impact Boxing show.
Great.
At 10:30 Eastern time. You can watch it on the network, and they also have it available on their website. I don't know if you can watch it overseas yet. I know in America you can watch it on either on the network, which is in like 88 million homes, or you can watch it on their app or their website. But I'd love to see it and be on TV in Britain somewhere.
When are you allowed to put it out on your own channels? Are you or not?
Well, after it airs on Friday, they make it available on Instagram.
Okay, fine. So people can watch it afterwards in the UK. It's not
so if it airs like on Friday night, I think that they put it out on their Instagram feed, usually maybe like on Monday. So people, if they're interested in Shakur, for example, would still be able to watch that interview. And he was very good in the interview. He talked a lot about, besides his upcoming fight, he talked about, certain fights that he wanted. He talked a little bit with me about what happened with the Josh Warrington fight.
Is that going to happen? Is that going to happen?
It doesn't seem like it, not at the moment anyway. But he talked about his desire for that fight. He talked about, he called out Leo Santa Cruz, and we talked about coming back to boxing. Shakur was a good interview, and I hope people get a chance to watch it. They'll enjoy it.
He's maturing, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He's slowly opening up, isn't he, and growing up. And I do like him very much. I'm off to have a couple of lamb chops and some sugar snap peas and some sauteed potatoes. Now it's a very late dinner for me. It's lovely to see you as always. I'll catch up with you next week, my friend.
Sounds good, Gareth. Good to talk to you.